Hi there, I am Elin Petronella, Swedish artist and writer. Though not living in Sweden at the moment, I live in Belgium with my French husband and two daughters. And today we are going to talk about publishing. Right, shocker. And I'm really excited to have you here, as I imagine that you are also as excited as I am about publishing, and more specifically, understanding and learning how publishing on versus off Substack can have different impacts on your overall art business and art ecosystem. I have done both, and I've also published on and off Substack as a self-published author and traditionally published in 2020 as well by Macmillan. So without further ado, I will share the presentation that I have prepared so that both of us can stay on track a little bit easier. I will be sharing this from a chronological perspective because I think that will be the most insightful as to understand why I did the decisions I did. First being choosing to self-publish, then traditional, and then self-publish again. And hopefully give you insights on how you might want to proceed in your own art business. So this is publishing as an artist on and off Substack. And what you see here is just a quick screenshot of my author profile on Substack. And you can see that I actually have two publications, which is another dimension that I will add into the talk and the experience in order to see how those fuel into each other, as well as why I chose to keep them separate, and even more so, how they both fill an important role in my art business. First is the Petronella Art Magazine. It's actually the second publication I created, which is really the visual side of my art business. And then we have Follow Your Gut, which is the first publication I created on Substack, talking about the artist life, the creative life, and ultimately the art business, because the two of them, when you are an artist, tend to blend together, don't they? It's very difficult to just tell your mind to stop thinking about ideas and solutions, and actually have come to the point where I embrace that like mix really, and the folio god is talking about just ways to find joy in that blend really, and find ways to make that work. So here you can just see an example of one of my works, get a face of me. Actually, you're seeing me already, but I'm an illustrator and doing modern hand embroidery as well. So that is a bit of a surprise to some sometimes. Really, I love to think of my embroideries as touchable drawings because I translate my drawings over to the fiber medium with threads and fabric, and explore ways of how you can break the limitations and ideas of preconceived ideas of what you can do with hand embroidery. I've also been published. So first independently published in 2019, which I did on my own site, on my own social channels, and to my email list. And then I re-edited and republished that book, When Will You Get a Real Job? It's the name of the book, on Substack. So I launched it in my own little digital bookshop that I set up on my Substack publication, which is the paid perk that you get when you upgrade. And then I was traditionally published by Macmillan in 2020. And that book was together with my husband, who I've been running my art business with. Now I'm doing most of it myself, but at the time we were doing and working with it closely together. So what to expect today? It's really a chat about this experience of having done both, and I'll share the chronological order of that and the impact on my art business. So a little bit, just an interesting background is that I had actually already been approached by two publishers before I self-published my first book, and I declined both of those offers. That was in 2018 and early 2019, and I published When Will You Get a Real Job after the summer in 2019. I believe it was September, October, something like that. The purple cover with orange text is the first cover that I released, and then the one to the right is actually the updated, re-edited cover that I released on Substack. So the amazing thing about self-publishing is that it's an ever-living thing, right? You can change, edit, make updates however you please. Nobody else can tell you not to do it. And then really having that experience of having had two different publishers approach me with different concepts for books, and just the whole experience of being in contact with them made me a little bit skeptical at first. And it's actually one of the main reasons why I decided to just go all in on self-publishing the first book. It made the decision easier because I felt I didn't want to feel gate kept. I also didn't know whether my first book would actually be suitable or wanting like be appropriate for a traditional publisher, because it was really a personal case study of it is a personal case study of the first 2 years of my husband's and mine art business. Because when we started out, what I missed the most was to hear and read about other artists' experiences in real time, as opposed to artists that write 10 or 20 years from now and looking in hindsight what they did. And probably the main reason for that was because we grew our art business in the time of social media, starting in 2016. And most of the things I was reading was pre-social media, and I felt that I couldn't relate to a lot of it. And so I decided to self-publish. Another thing that was also really interesting is that one of the supposed publishers that approached us were actually, I realized after doing a lot of research, so thank you, internet, you can go and check out everything. And I realized that one of those art book publishers were not actually a publisher, but a packager. And I say warning signs here, it's really because myself, I didn't even knew that such a thing existed. I thought they were publishers, right? I didn't know that there were different distinctions. And I realized that when arts and embroidery is often categorized as a craft. And so within arts and craft there, and even photography, many times there are packagers that propose you an already ready-made concept. And here you want to ask yourself whether it's serving their imagined audience or whether it actually serves your audience, right? There's no royalties involved. So that was the trigger for me of why I started to do more research, because I wondered, what's up with this? Equally, we got a proposed pretty high, I thought, in relation to it being a first book. It's a larger upfront payment, but obviously to cover the non-existent royalty checks. And they played all along on this starving artist mindset, which is something I talk quite a lot about as well in Follow Your Gut and Substack. But really made me feel as though they assumed that I had no idea about business, that I didn't know how to reach my people or sell anything, which was interesting to me considering that. So I'll change to the next slide. In case you're wondering why I would even be proposed to publish books in the first place. Well, I focused on building my own platforms first rather than passing through gatekeepers. To be honest, it wasn't even a consideration to just reach out to someone before I started sharing my work. And so at the time of them reaching out, I had now these screenshots I can see of Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube. So Charles is my husband, therefore Charles and Ellen. At the time, I had well over 200K. Now, that was 4 years ago, 5 years ago in 2019. Since then, I've hardly post on Instagram, actually. I've significantly reduced social media posting and now transitioned over my focus to Substack, which I'll get to in a second. So it has dropped below 200K, but it's still quite significant. And I just found it very interesting how this assumption that even though you have big pages in different ways, that they just assume that you don't know. And that didn't sit well with me. So again, why I went for the self-publishing route. So this is really why we got approached by publishers. And what was really, really interesting, even more interesting, is that they never, ever asked me for an email list size, how many emails I had. They purely looked at social proof. So that is how I would say having large audiences online, the main benefit of it is social proof more than anything else, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you're making a lot of money or that you are having a sustainable business, because So this second point is why it's so interesting that they didn't even care about my email list. I launched my first self-published book, When Will You Get a Real Job, to my social media audience and email list, of which 95% of people who purchased my book, they came from email. So shouldn't that be the first thing that you want to know as a publisher? That was super interesting to me. And this is where, for example, as you may know, Substack serves a brilliant audience as a community and audience builder, in that it builds off of email lists as opposed to purely followers. Now, some may argue that with a new follower feature over on Notes, oh, we're losing email subscribers. Well, it's still incomparable to the other mainstream social medias, where it's very difficult to get people off those apps and over into your email. It requires so much more work to get a person to convert from just watching your work into an actual email list, so that you kind of own, that sounds maybe funny, but where you are actually in control of how and when you contact those people, and not reliant on an algorithm only. At the time of launching my first book, I had about 15,000 on my email list. Now it's less because I've been deleting inactive subscribers. Now, another difference with before I discovered Substack is that most email providers, they charge you per month based on how many emails you have. So inevitably, an inactive subscriber is going to cost you money. And usually it costs quite a lot of money. So this is another thing to consider, and that actually I find to be in some way a benefit on Substack, where you don't even have to worry about that, whether it's going to cost you more money to have more people. Another really interesting point is that when we received the third, so when Macmillan came to us, the publishing deal that we actually accepted, I thought that my first self-published book wouldn't even count. Like, I just decided that I wanted to do this because it was a passion project of mine. I really wanted to write about it, to share it for those who cared, and for those who might find that it was helpful to read about the real-time experience of other artists. And actually, I got positively surprised, because they really were super encouraging and wanted me to add that as into my bio as an achievement in the traditionally published print version. And this is another thing to like, so actually the whole idea that, self-published work isn't necessarily valued as much as a traditionally published work started to actually it matters, you see? So this was really liberating to me as well, just knowing that, everything you do counts. Everything you do counts, whether you do it self-published or traditionally published. You may wonder why we decided to actually accept the traditional publisher, Macmillan, to actually publish our book. So before that, what really stood out when they reached out to us, as opposed to the previous ones, was that they hadn't already developed a set concept. It was not a matter of us signing under to, yes, we're going to do this book with a proposed title and exactly what type of projects we were going to do, et cetera, et cetera. Rather, it was hey, we're thinking that you might want to do an art book in this way. Does that work? Does not? What ideas do you have? So it was really, it felt really inviting. It felt really respectful of us being in charge of our own work and of our own audience and community. There were also royalties involved. Also, it felt like a relatively fair payment split, because we did not only receive a royalty advance payment, but we also got commissions separately. So that was an amount of money that would not count towards the royalties, but a separate commission for doing the photographer for the work. Which was brilliant, because that made the whole total feel like, okay, we're actually getting paid a bit. And so why did we accept? Well, really, because as you saw, we had very big, and I didn't even include my husband's Instagram on that previous screenshot. No, it was before that. But we had about 500,000 across our social media channels. And there were a lot of younger, I was going to say, not necessarily an age of them, but just younger accounts on social media, because embroidery was really exploding in 2019 and even more so in 2020 when COVID came around. But we felt that what are ways that can make us continue to stand out? Because just having a tick, seeing that we were verified accounts and all of those types of stuff, it only matters so much. So what can we do to just legitimize our own presence and make ourselves stand out? Well, is to actually have a traditional anchor as well, especially as we didn't come from the traditional route, so to say. My husband has done art school in Paris and everything, so more traditional in that sense. I've never done official art school. I'm self-taught. And so it felt a way to just bridge that gap into making, establishing that authority more. And so that is why we decided to do it. We were commissioned to make 20 patterns. I was doing the drawing plus the embroidery. My husband did the photography, I did the writing and the editing. A lot of work, right? In When Will You Get a Real Job, I actually break down the previous approaches by publisher. I broke down in terms of money, income, as well as how much I estimated the work to involve and the split payments per hour and everything, really just making a calculation as to how much I found that to be worth. And considering no royalties, that's when it was like a no-go either way. And in this one, as I said, apart from the money, where I generally believe that when you own the entire copyright for your work, you can profit off of that for eternity. And I think that that is the way that you can ensure long-term sustainability, the easiest, the least stressful way as an independent artist is when you own your work and when you own your audience. Then you are in direct contact. You decide when you make money, when you make campaigns, when you want to make sales. But signing up and saying yes to this deal, it had another value, as I just discussed, about increasing our authority in an otherwise very digital space. What you see here is the cover. The mindful embroidery, stitch your way to relaxation with charming street scenes. We're specifically specialized in architectural hand embroidery, and this is of Paris. It's where our business started. My husband is from Paris. We met in Paris. All of the first architectural embroideries we did were in Paris. Inside of the book, there are not only Paris patterns. There's Italy, there's south of France. You even have some of Scandinavia. But the cover had to be of Paris, right? And the book actually got translated into South Korean as well. So that was a fun little twist. For the first one was in 2020, almost right off the back of the first launch. And now in 2024, we got informed that they were doing a second edition of the South Korean version, which was really cool. What you see here on the photo is I just snapped a quick photo. I have the South Korean version at home. I obviously don't understand what it says, but I think it looks very artsy. And also what's very interesting is that they chose another cover. So this is another of the designs in the book, and they chose another cover compared to the English-speaking version, which I found very interesting from just a cultural perspective. But despite receiving the news of a second edition in South Korean, we received also the news that they would stop the English version, stop printing new books. And they said that it was too slow sales. And it became a bit of a, again, hit, or I say again, it just did become a hit in the sense of like, okay, so someone else decides when something isn't worthy anymore. And it felt like, whew. And I suppose it just reconfirmed my beliefs in owning your work. I don't regret at all that we have the traditional book. It was really an invaluable experience. I'm incredibly grateful for it. I think Macmillan were very professional. But when you first start writing and working with a traditional publisher, so I did here just a quick pros and cons list, which I think is important for everybody to do, is that personally, I think I'm not alone in thinking that when you have a publisher, you imagine that they will take on some of the work of marketing, of putting it all together. They do to some extent, but most of it is still on you. So we did acquire the status of having been traditionally published. We did gain an invaluable experience, and we got the money upfront split between the photos and the royalties. But then you don't decide what happens next, how long it's in print, how it's being distributed, what price to put. So this was a big, the first slap, I would say. So the book was about $22, and generally for 20 patterns. Now, generally that would be the worth of 2 or 3 patterns, unique patterns in our shop, where we would receive 100% of that. So that was also a big worry of mine when it first got released, that why would anybody buy any patterns from us now when they can get all of these patterns in the book separately, and that I had to keep promoting something that I would get maybe 10% of the royalties from as opposed to 100%. So suddenly it became just this clash. In my mind, it was very difficult to relate to it. And I was not prepared for that. I was also not prepared for how I did. I thought I would have more support in the actual writing and editing. So we did have an editor, an assigned editor, but just the editing of the entire book, the amount of editing work involved almost felt like an entire book. The amount of time and energy just spent on editing that, I felt like I could have created 2 entire courses and launched and already made more. So this is something to really consider, what the goals are really with the work that you do, whether you want to be able to live off of it or whether there are other metrics that matter more to you. And also, when you traditionally publish, again, you can't edit and re-release it on your own terms. So that's what I did with my first book, my first self-published book. I re-edited and republished When Will You Get a Real Job now in 2024. Actually, that was following when I started Substack in end of November 2023, more so beginning December. Follow your gut. I really did that first as a creative experiment because I wanted to see if I would be able to grow an audience from zero, as I had done in the past. Now, being a mother of 2 as well, I needed a new outlet that wasn't visual all over, but still be able to share my images and things like that, which Notes, by the way, is perfect for visual artists for that. I didn't import any emails, no email list, to really see if Substack would be a viable strategy to continue to grow my email list, to continue to grow my independence, and to see if I would be able to reuse the work I had done, the self-published book. In 6 months, I grew about 0 to 2K of free readers. It worked beautifully. When you focus on ways to connect with an audience, to connect with somebody who resonates with your work, whether you are on Instagram, Pinterest, wherever you are, those basic principles of connection remain the same. And this is something that I think is forgotten, and we focus so much just on the platform per se, but really, if you rather take a step back and focus on the humanity of the person, and what makes them spark and tick and want to follow somebody's work, it makes, at least I find that it makes it easier. And my experiment turned out to work. So I'm really excited about that. And then at the 5-month mark, I launched the paid feature by doing a public launch of the re-editing and republishing and re-releasing of this work. When Will You Get a Real Job? To be the paid perk. You can also see just a screenshot of Follow Your Gut where I added books as in my tab. So that is where I imagine my digital bookshop to be. I became a bestseller 2 months later. Thank you, everyone. And I launched my second publication, Petronella Art Magazine, because I found that, well, my experiment filled all of the boxes that I was wondering about. And I now felt confident to move over my email list from just privately and actually use Substack as an actual viable strategy to continue to grow even my art business and not just the writing business. So I use these as 2 separate spaces to have the visual arts as well as my writing art. And I'm free to cross promote as I like, right? I'm the author. I'm in charge of all of that. But mentally, and again, this is another thing. As a visual artist, I see things very visually. It's easier for me to visualize these divisions of what type of work I put out on the different channels, and it just makes it easier for me to relate. And I imagine if it's easier for me, I'm not that unique compared to everyone, which means if it's easier for me, it's probably easier for you too. So that is another of those basic principles in terms of just communicating with other people, which we sometimes forget when we sit behind our screens, that really it's real people watching and reading this. And whenever we are questioning if how something will be received, let's just think about how we would react to it, and that will make it all much easier. If we feel joyful and excited about it, then there's a chance somebody else will too. So really, when you own your audience, there are no limits. On the back of re-editing and re-releasing When Will You Get a Real Job, I've been able to build an additional writing business from Follow Your Gut with 3 income streams already. That is the paid newsletter. So I've also added a paid column to be sequel book of how to be a mother artist. So really the first When Will You Get a Real Job was the 2 first years entering art business together with my husband. Then we became parents in 2020, and now we have 2 beautiful little girls. And it's been the past 4 years have really been a matter of figuring out how to navigate the two, being a mother and an artist, running a business, all of that. And so that is going to be the sequel book. And I decided to write it as a paid column. Like this, I'm sure I not only get paid for the actual production, I also am sure that I'm holding myself accountable and it will happen. It will take place. The book is going to be written. I also made some affiliate sales, speaking on a summit, and personal mentoring. So really, whenever you own your audience, only you set the limitations as to what you can do. And also having your email list, and as I know that others on this summit, the Sparkle Summit here that you're listening to, that what they've done, they keep on being traditionally published while still owning your audience at the same time. So one thing doesn't have to exclude the other, which I find just absolutely beautiful. Again, I think my experience of having been approached by traditional publishers, then self-publishing and still being approached again, and them encouraging me to use my self-published work as a reference of achievement, I think the only thing that does is just re-emphasizing the fact that everything you do counts, whether it's independent, whether it's not. It serves into this overall benefit of who you are as an artist, because ultimately, if you do choose to still go down the publishing route, the traditionally publishing route, if you have an email list and you own part of your audience yourself, you're still going to have a benefit in making more sales, being able to negotiate a better deal with a publisher, etc., from the get-go. So really, I don't think that there is any reason not to build something out for yourself, regardless of whether you choose to still be traditionally published or not. And with Petronella Art Magazine, again, just going back to the example of the visual stuff, thanks to the built-in growth engine on Substack, which I consider to be Notes, I see that as a social media aspect of Notes. It's how I relate to it. It makes it easier. And my first personal experience to just see how efficient Substack would be as a growth engine, I have now pivoted to make most of my marketing efforts to nurture and grow my main art business on Substack through a digital art magazine. My Instagram account was Petronella Art, so really I just called it the Petronella Art Magazine to see that as the continuation of my social media presence. I'm no longer posting on Instagram. It's been a few years, but I've been for a couple of years, this idea has been morphing in my mind as to how I can continue share, but in a new form that felt more joyful for me. I'm able to repurpose old content, YouTube, Instagram posts, blog posts. I've got loads of it. I've got so much that this magazine is going to be filled with art in it. And I'm still free to also create new things that I feel fit into the new season of life that I'm in, which is really exciting. In only 5 weeks, thanks to sharing an artwork, roughly I share an art image that I'm repurposing not all the time actually. I'm sketching, doing a visual journal daily, which I'm also sharing on Notes. But a lot of notes I've repurposed. I've been able to grow 500 new email subscribers in only 5 weeks. I took a quick screenshot, subscribers from app, basically people coming from within Substack. Claire, she's going to know more specifically what that means. For me, it just means I got all of these new people from within Substack in 5 weeks as of doing this presentation. That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Just for reference, in 2020, I did a weekly free workshop series as a way to boost my email list again. So that was the biggest effort I did compared to 2018 when I built the first email list, and then we with having free lead magnets and things like that, doing free workshops, we grew an email list to about 1,000 relatively quickly. I wanted to see if that would still work in 2020. I did over 6 months, got 400. I'm saying 6 months, got 400 email subscribers, despite me having 200,000 on Instagram. That's how hard it is to convert people, despite it being free workshops, etc., compared to Substack in 2024. I can only say, wow, there's no reason not to be doing this. I'm also able to relaunch all of the courses I've got. I've got more than 35 online courses in the Charles and Elin Academy, which, by the way, will be pivoting soon to the Petronella Art Academy. But the courses will remain the same. I've got more than 100 patterns. I'm able to relaunch that to all of these new people, as well as re-nurturing those who've been with me through all the years. It's magic. So I'm really sharing this as I hope, hopefully, an inspiring story, a reason for you to just go for it. And coming soon, I was almost saying this on the previous slide. One of the things so we are all here today, brought together by Claire and Russell, right? And their book, Build a World-Class Substack, on Kickstarter. I'm so inspired, and I'm hoping that I'm inspiring you to start a Substack with this presentation, both as an artist and a writer. But it made me think that I also need to start a Kickstarter, right? That's how it works. Connecting with other artists, just networking that way, whether physically or online. What it does is that it helps you to connect with other people who are doing cool things. And like Russell usually say, it helps you to connect with other people doing cool things so that you can continue to do more cool things. And that's really it. So as it's been about the 2 years that I've really been thinking about how to transition the Petronella art from Instagram and over to something else, I found the Petronella Art magazine on Substack. And now I want to kind of mark this transition with a physical transition as well. So it's a little bit building on the idea of the traditionally published book, right? When you are in the digital space, I think we need these physical anchors to just connect our digital presence to the physical presence, and also physically connect with our readers. That's something that art in general otherwise do, which I find beautiful. Through my art classes, I sit and do my physical embroidery that I can feel, and I know that my students who do my classes, they sit and feel as they are embroidering the designs that I've made. And this is a physical connection that is absolutely incredible. And I was going to say hidden. It's very much here, but we don't see it, but it's just as important. And so I'm right now playing with the Petronella Art in Your Pocket as a concrete physical transition. It will be a pocket-sized art book that you can bring with you anywhere, anytime. Because why? Well, because art shouldn't be privileged to clean coffee tables or long stretches of time. I'm a mother of 2 children under 4 years. There is no clean coffee table here, but still there's just as much the need for art. And wherever you are, whatever stage you are at in your life right now, I think art should be able to be brought with you. And all of these beautiful art books that you want to have display, you want to sit and indulge in them, they are always so big, aren't they? And so I want to find a way to do Petronella Art in Your Pocket. It will be curated from the Petronella Art Instagram. Got more than 1,000 posts on there, and add project stories and art prompts so that you can have that little inspiring art book right in the back of your pocket, and travel the world through the eye of a needle. I hope that pitch made you as excited about this as I am. And I want to thank Claire and Russell for just bringing that to life in me, and continuing to inspiring everybody to just go for it, whether it is, again, whether you want to go for it traditionally published or whether you want to do self-published. Either way, get out there, start sharing your work, start connecting, and those ideas will start popping up, and you will know and get more clarity as to how to move forward. Before leaving you today, I kind of already went ahead of myself and shared, but I really want just, if there's anything you take from this today, I want you to just ponder a second or a minute or 10 on deciding what is the right way to do for you. By the way, you see the screenshot I have on the right is just actually, I took a screenshot of my Instagram feed just to get a little bit of a vibe as to my aesthetic, I suppose. And the artwork. Equally, this one is also from my Instagram that I screenshotted and put in. So why do you want to get published, and what role will published work play in your life? Is it to fulfill a dream of having a book in a bookshop? And by the way, that can potentially happen anyway, as more and more indie bookshops accept self-published books as well. Always something to keep in mind. Is the goal to actually live off your art? Use it as a lead magnet to other offerings. So that is a little bit what has happened with When Will You Get a Real Job? When I published it to a new, fresh audience on Substack on Follow Your Gut, so on my main art list, when I published it the first time, people bought it because they were interested in our story, mostly because they were interested in the art side, doing that as a hobby. Whereas on Follow Your Gut and Substack, people bought it who are thinking of doing the same thing themselves. And so on the back of that book, I've received multiple inquiries for mentoring. So that is really how a book can serve as a quote lead magnet. I know that gets very businessy terminology, but that is a way to look at a book as well. Or if you just want to use it as social proof, so that was, or enhancing your authenticity in a field, your expertise in a field. So that was kind of what we did with Mindful Embroidery, the Mindful Embroidery book with Macmillan. So thank you so much for your time. You can Google, that's always as funny every time. You can Google Elin Petronella to join me wherever you like. Petronella Art Magazine, or Follow Your Gut on Substack. CharltonElin.com and CharltonElinAcademy.com is where I have all of my art products. This is going to change to Petronella Art Academy. But for now, it's Charlton Elin. Either way, they will be redirected once the rebranding happens. So I'm trying to not feel overwhelmed with that. And that's a fine. And as I'm speaking, I actually just see that I misspelled my own name, which I'm at the end of this presentation. So that will just have to be there. Elin Petronella, thankfully, it was the right picture that came up. I just took a screenshot of me typing into Google and this came up. So I believe that you will find me as well. I'm quite happy that they chose this picture of me in Copenhagen as the front image. You can also see the second one is Elin Petronella Embroidery. So really, I do think you will be able to find me. And if you want to join in on the Petronella art in your pocket, you're going to find information all about that either on Kickstarter, I suppose. I'm not sure it's already live by the time this presentation goes live, but you will definitely find information about it on Substack. So don't worry, you won't miss out. And I will be shouting about it anyway, because I'm so excited, as you can clearly see. So thank you so much for your time. And I wish you all the empowerment and encouragement in moving forward with your own creative art journey.